Thank you guys for the way that you love. Thank you guys for the way that you give. Thank you guys for just who you are and for just being part of what we believe God is building here at CityPlace. And so they say, I want to kind of address an elephant in the room this morning. They say that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results. And you may wonder why in the world, if you're visiting with us today, why in the world is the pastor preaching in a football jersey? And the reason why is because your pastor is insane, and he is a Florida State fan to the core. And there's a guy up in the balcony who's enjoying himself today quite immensely because he's a Hurricane fan. And if you don't know, Florida State lost to the Miami Hurricanes yesterday, and so Alex and I have this really fun for him jersey bet that I have continued to make for the last 3 years and have to wear this hideous jersey. And so if anybody has $17 million so we can buy out Willie Taggart, the coach of Florida State's contract, just give that to me afterwards, okay? So we'll be good. So anyway, so that's why I wear this hideous jersey. So anyhow, so this week we're kicking off a new series called Fearless. Last week Kim wrapped up Unsung Heroes, and I don't know about you guys, but I thought she did amazing, right? So really good. And she wrapped up Unsung Heroes last week, and she talked to us a little bit about Esther, and she was talking to us a little bit about the idea of fear and faith and some things like that. And so we're going to piggyback off of that for the next couple weeks, and I believe God's given me a word for us for the next 2 weeks, and this idea of what it looks like for us to live our life fearlessly. And so often in our lives, we live our lives fearful, but what would it look like for us if we were to live our lives fearless? And so as we unpack this over the next couple weeks, I'm hoping that you guys will be encouraged. I hope that you guys will be strengthened, and I hope that you guys will see in this, because I really truly believe that God wants us and desires for us to live a life that is fearless, not fearful. And so let me pray for us this morning, and then I want to dive into what I believe God has for us this morning. So Father, we love you. And Father, we're just grateful for an opportunity to be in your house. We're thankful for an opportunity to worship, Lord. We're grateful for an opportunity to listen to your word be preached. And so Father, I pray right now that your Holy Spirit would just fall in this place. And I pray, Lord, that you would move in a way. I pray that you would open our hearts and our minds, Lord, to what your word is going to try to teach us today. Lord, let it be your words and not mine that are spoken today. And Father, we just love you. Thank you for our church. Thank you for these people. Thank you for all that you're doing. And Lord, we just love you. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. So as we talk about this idea of being fearful for a little bit, I don't know about you guys. Those that know me pretty well know that I don't really do anything scary. Like some of you guys like horror movies, some of you guys like scary stuff. Like that is not me. Like I'm not the horror movie guy. Like no thank you. There's multiple reasons why I don't like them, but one of the reasons is I'm just a huge scaredy cat, and I just don't really like being scared, right? And so I never have. When I was 10 years old, I had a friend who we were growing up, and his mom and parents were gone during the day, and he said he was allowed to watch horror movies, and so I gave into my very first horror movie when I was like 10 years old, and I lived on a street, my mom and I lived on a street here in Lakeland called Carolina Street, which is too far off of Lake Collinsworth. And when I'm at my friend's house, we're watching this movie, and it's known as Nightmare on Elm Street, but for about 2 weeks, I had nightmares on Carolina Street because I didn't sleep for 2 weeks, right? And so I didn't sleep for 2 weeks, and so I don't really do horror movies at all. But when I was in high school, one of my best friends, a guy named Henry, and I, and a couple of girls that we were dating, sorry Kim, were dating, decided that we were going to go to Halloween Horror Nights. Why I would go to Halloween Horror Nights, I have no idea, because I don't like anything scary. And so we go to Halloween Horror Nights, and this was a long time ago, so I can only imagine how scary it is now compared to what it was 25 years ago. And we go to Halloween Horror Nights, and if you don't know what it is, it's at Universal Studios, and it's a ton of really well-done haunted houses, and it's a pretty miserable experience, right? And so we get to Halloween Horror Nights, and we go in, and I don't really want to be there, and Henry doesn't really want to be there either, but we're there because you do stupid stuff when you're a teenager. Amen in the city. And so we're working our way through all these different haunted houses, 3, 4 different haunted houses. People are jumping out, things are coming out of the walls, all this stuff is happening. Everybody's screaming, some people are crying, some people are laughing, right? And you're working your way through all these haunted houses, and I have no idea why anyone would like this, but lots of people do. So we get our way, and we just continue to work, and I'm just so fearful. Like every time we walk into the haunted house, and you don't know what to expect, you don't know what's going to happen, and I'm just fearful. of what's going to go on and what's going to come out of the wall and what's going to jump out this time and what's this going to look like, and just full of fear. And often we walk through our lives that way. But often I've been through so much in my life where I have just been fearful. Things that I've been called to, things that I feel led to, things that I'm not sure about, unsure situations with things that Kim and I face with jobs or family and all these things. Like, so often in our lives, we just end up being so fearful. And we end up living our lives in a state of fear. And it's no way for us to live, but for some reason, so many of us seem to live our life in a state of fear. And fear can come in many different shapes, and fear can come in many different sizes. But for you, like, what does fear look like for you? That maybe and we've talked about this before when we've talked about this topic, but maybe the fear for you is something silly like the dark or spiders or snakes or clowns or whatever it may be, right? There may be certain things. There's heights. There's so many things that we can be afraid of. But when we look at the big context of fear, that maybe there's a fear of failure in you. Maybe there's a fear of what your future looks like. Maybe there's a fear of your job, or maybe there's a fear for those of us that are parents, like what's going to happen with my children. Maybe right now you're facing a fear of some financial situation. Maybe there's some unknown in your finances and you're just not sure about that. I mean, whatever it is that you may be fearful of, your health, at times it haunts us, and at times it follows us. But what if we were to live our lives fearlessly instead of fearfully? And we're going to see in a passage today, and I believe it's going to be a story that many of us are familiar with, and if you don't know it, then it's one of my favorites. But we're going to see in today's passage what it looks like to be fearless and fearful. But I believe that there are some takeaways for us that we can learn from this story that will help us stay fearless. And many of you are wired in a way where you're not afraid of anything. At least it's what you say. But I think deep down inside, there are some things that we are fearful of. You may not be afraid of the dark, but there are other things that you may be afraid of. Excuse me for a second, guys. There may be some other things that you're fearful of. As you have your Bibles today, I want you to turn with me to Matthew chapter 14. That's worse.
Switch over.
Sorry, guys. It's the stupid jersey. God's like, I'm going to make you take it off. Thank you, Jesus. So, Matthew chapter 14. If it keeps doing, I'll switch mics, guys. I apologize. And so, Matthew chapter 14 is a story that many of us will be familiar with, but as we get into Matthew chapter 14, we see the death of John the Baptist. We see... Check. We're good? Okay. Let's roll with that. All right. So we see in the story today, we're all messed up today. Isn't technology awesome?
Yeah.
So if you're visiting with today, sorry. So, all right. So Matthew chapter 14, it's a story that many of us, we see the death of John the Baptist, and then we see a story that many of us will be familiar with where Jesus feeds the 5,000. That there's a few loaves of bread and a couple of fish, and Jesus and his disciples, there's this miracle, and Jesus feeds 5,000 people, which was really more like 15 or 20,000 when you count children and wives and children. They just counted the men, which was 5,000. So they feed these 15 to 20,000 people with some bread and some fishes. And then after this series, or after this miracle happens, Jesus sends his disciples off in a boat to go to the other side because he knows that he needs some time alone with the Father. After having this miracle and doing this miracle, he knows that he needs to kind of replenish himself. He needs to kind of refill his tank, so to speak. And so he sends the crowds away, he sends the disciples away, and he goes up on this mountaintop to pray, and that's where we're going to pick up in our story today. So look with me, Matthew chapter 14, verse 22. And it says, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone. But the boat by this time was a long way from land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he, Jesus, came to them, walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, and they said, Is it a ghost? And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. And Peter answered him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And he said, Come. So Peter got out of the boat, and he walked on water, and he came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. And Jesus immediately reached out his hand, and he took hold of him, saying to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, Truly you are the Son of God. And so in this story, as we just mentioned, they have this amazing miracle. Like, I can't even really fathom and imagine this idea of feeding 15 or 20,000 people with a couple loaves of bread and a couple fish. And they had this amazing miracle, and they had leftover food because there was such a surplus of what Jesus was able to do in that moment. But I always find it interesting to me that after this major miracle, or after a major significant thing that Jesus does, he always knows that he needs time to replenish. He always knows that he needs time to get alone with the Father. He knows that he needs time to spend some time praying and do that. And so often we miss his leadership model that he shows us because we just go and go and go and go and go and never take time to feed ourselves and never take time to replenish ourselves. And then we find ourselves burnt out and exhausted. And Jesus sends the disciples away, and he sends the crowds away, and he goes up on the mountaintop, and he just begins to pray and spend some time with his Father. And the disciples are in this boat, and they're working their way across the lake, or they're working their way across. And a storm blows in. And the wind begins to blow, and the waves begin to crash against the boat, and it tells us that they were fearful. It tells us that they were afraid. It tells us that they weren't sure what was going to happen. I can only imagine for them, like, what it looks like and what they were feeling in that moment. Matthew, being one of the 12 disciples, gives us a first-hand account of what they were feeling. It's not like Matthew heard from somebody. Like, Matthew was there in the boat, and he saw exactly and knew exactly how he felt, and he's writing that, telling us that they were afraid, that they were fearful. Jesus begins to work his way out to them, and he begins to walk out on the water, which is pretty amazing. It's a miracle in itself. And Jesus walks out on the water, and the disciples see him, and then they become even more fearful because now they see Jesus walking, and they think that they don't realize it is Jesus. They think that it's a ghost, and they begin to kind of get even more scared because they think that this ghost is walking towards them on the water. And it says that they cried out in fear. Jesus immediately kind of calms their fears and says, "Man, take heart, it's I. Do not be afraid. Do not be fearful. Do not be scared of what is going on around you or what you think that you see, because it's me." And Peter, being the leader that he is, being the outspoken person that he is, immediately says, "Well, Lord, if it's you, Jesus, if it's you, then I just want you to tell me to come to you, and I'll get out of the boat and I will walk to you." Talk about faith. And Jesus says, "Come on. I mean, it's me, Peter, come." And Peter steps out of the boat, and it says that he walked to Jesus. I can't even tell you how many times I've read the story. And as I was reading it this week, I never realized that Peter actually got to Jesus, right? Like I just missed that one couple of words that he actually got to Jesus. I always kind of felt like he was on his way and then kind of began to sink, and I missed that. I don't know, maybe you didn't, but I have. And it says that Peter walked on the water and he got to Jesus. And the moment that he got there in Jesus' presence, then he began to notice the winds and the waves and all the things that were going on around him and all of the distractions and all the stuff that was vying for his time and all the things that he was fearful of before he got out of the boat in the first place. And he began to take his eyes off of Jesus and he began to sink. He cries out, "Lord, save me!" Jesus reaches down and picks him up and saves him. And then Jesus has the statement to him that he says, "Oh, you of little faith. Why did you doubt?" And often I've heard it taught, and I've heard it in this way, that Jesus is disappointed in Peter because he didn't believe enough. But man, I think in a way, I don't know about you, but I'm probably not jumping out of the boat. I'm probably not the guy going, "Hey, Jesus, if it's you, tell me, and I'll come to you." I've led a lot of things and been in leadership for a long time, but I don't know that I'm jumping out of a boat to walk on water. I don't know. I don't know if my faith is that strong. I would hope that it is, but I don't know that it is. But Peter had the faith to step out of the boat, and he begins to work his way, and Jesus just says, "Hey, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And I look at it from the standpoint of going, man, there's more faith inside of you. You're capable of more. You had enough faith to step out of the boat when nobody else had. But you, man, oh, you of little faith. But man, there's more inside of you. There's more hidden. There's more faith there that if you would just dig down deep, if you would just believe more, if you would just trust more, if you would just love more, man, you are capable of so much more. Why did you doubt? And it says that Jesus picks Peter up and pulls him out of the water, and they begin to work their way back to the boat. And when they get into the boat, it says that everybody, man, they just begin to worship Jesus because of who he is. And so I believe this morning that there are fourth reasons that Peter was fearless in the moment. There are four reasons that I think that we can learn from Peter and why he was fearless in this moment when he first stepped out of the boat. The first one is this, is that he was obedient. He was obedient. It's significant enough in itself that Peter was the one that said, "Jesus, if it's you, tell me and I'll come to you." None of the other disciples said, "Yeah, Jesus, if it's you, we'll follow too." Peter was the only one. Matthew's writing this from a first-hand account. He was there. He was in the boat. And Peter goes, "Man, Jesus, if it's you, you tell me and I'll come." And Jesus says, "Come." And Peter immediately gets out of the boat and he begins to walk towards Jesus. So in that moment, Jesus told him to do something, and he was obedient. He wasn't worried about the waves. He wasn't worried about the wind. He wasn't worried about the distractions or the financial hardships or this or that or anything that was before him, any of the distractions and any of the fears and any of the things that he may have had in those moments. He was just obedient because Jesus told him to do something. When Kim and I stepped out in faith almost 4 years ago, in January, we'll celebrate 4 years as a church, right? Awesome. When we stepped out in faith to plant the church, we were in a pretty safe boat. Our boat was pretty good. We were youth pastors at Fuel Church and leading and doing a lot of stuff. And they wanted to plant more churches, and we felt called to it. They had told us that we were going to plant more churches. But the time was a little bit, God had laid it on our hearts. The time is now. And we didn't want to step out of the boat. We didn't want to get out of the boat and go and plant the church. We were in a pretty safe boat. It was good. Things were all right. It was a little rocky sometimes. You're going to come up on some storms in life. It just happens. But, man, it was good. But God called us to something, and we step out of the boat and plant the church with a group of some other people, and look what God is doing. How often in our lives has God told us to do something, and he's given us clear direction to do something, but yet we're afraid to, and so we're not obedient? As much as I love the fact that Kim and I had the courage to step out in faith to plant the church, there's been plenty of other times that God has given us a direction or giving me a direction or something that I'm supposed to do, and I've talked myself out of it, or I've talked him out of it, or I haven't talked him out of it, but talked myself out of what he told me to do. Yeah, I don't know, God, probably not today. Yeah, I'm a little tired today, a little fearful today, a little worried, not sure that we got the money that we can do that, not sure that that can happen. Can we wait on that maybe 6 more months? How about you? How many times has God given us direction to do something and yet we're afraid to do it, we're fearful to do it, and so instead of being obedient, we're disobedient? The second reason I believe Peter was fearless in the moment is that he believed. He says to Jesus, man, Jesus, if it's you, then tell me to come to you and I'll step out of the boat. And Jesus says, come. And so Peter was obedient and stepped out of the boat and did what Jesus told him to. But there's a part of the story where Peter had to believe that Jesus was who he said that he was. He had to believe that Jesus had his back. He had to believe that Jesus was who he said he was. He had to believe in that moment that that was really Jesus. Because remember the story just a couple seconds before this, they thought it was a ghost. And now all of a sudden there's a man standing on the water who says, yeah, it's me, come to me. And Peter had to believe in that moment that it was Jesus. And how often in our lives are we faced with situations and faced with certain things when we're fearful and we're not sure that it's God calling us to something, and we're not sure exactly what it is, and we're not sure what to do, and we're not sure if we should believe, and we're not sure if we should have enough faith, and we're not sure about this, and we're not sure about that. But man, we can look from Peter's example and understand from Peter's example that he was fearless in this moment because he believed that Jesus was who he said he was. Do you? The third reason that I believe Peter was fearless in this moment is that he trusted. He says, Jesus, if it's you, then tell me to step out of the boat. And Jesus says, come. And Peter was obedient because he believed, he was obedient to what Jesus told him to. He believed that Jesus was who he said he was, but he had to trust in that moment too. And I think in that moment, I think trust is kind of the key in this whole thing, because even when we're facing hard times in life, and even when we're facing hardships in life, so often we don't trust God. We talk about it almost every single week, that there is a trust factor that happens in our relationship with the Father. And some of us are just control freaks, and we think that, man, I'll give God 80% of this, but God, if you don't come through, I got the 20% and I got you. I got your back, God. Or maybe you can have part of this, but I'm not 100% sure that you're going to come through, so I'm just not sure. Like, if you do, it's awesome, but if you don't, then I don't know. I mean, Peter could have done that. Peter could have, stepped out of the boat and put one foot on, and it's like, Jesus, are you sure? Are you really sure it's you? I think it's you. All right, maybe. Have you ever been at a pool party and the weather's starting to cool down and you kind of walk over and stick your foot in the water to see how cold it is before you decide to jump in? Your kids just jumped in, right? The adults were like, yeah, no, that's cool, I'm good. Right? Peter could have done that. He could have dipped his toe in and I don't really know, but he didn't. He just stepped out of the boat and started walking towards Jesus because he trusted. Do you trust this morning that whatever it is that you may be facing, whatever the situation may be, whether it's financially, or whether it's relationally, or whether it's medically, or whatever it may be, do you trust that God's got your best interest, that God has your back? Because so often I don't believe that we do. I think sometimes Jesus looks at us and says, man, you have little faith. You got so much more in you. You're capable of so much more. The fourth reason why I believe Peter was fearless in the moment was that he loved. He says, Jesus, if it's you, tell me to step out of the boat. And he says, come. And Peter steps out of the boat, so he was obedient. He believed that Jesus was who he said he was. And he trusted Jesus, that this is legitimately, this is who it is. And I trust you that you got me. That if Peter knew that if he didn't even think about sinking, but I knew he had to know. I mean, you got to think in the back of his mind that he knew, man, if I start to sink, then Jesus has got my back. But because of his love and because of his devotion and because of his dedication to Jesus and who he was and the love that he felt towards Christ, it propelled him to step out of the boat. I have to believe that. That he was just so devoted and so loved Christ that as soon as he felt like it was Jesus, why else would he be like, man, if it's you, then tell me to come to you. I mean, he was obedient, he believed, he trusted, and I believe that he loved Jesus and wanted to get to him. And see, Peter was good. As long as he just focused on his next step, he was good. Go back to the story of me and my buddy at Halloween Horror Nights. After about 3 or 4 of these haunted houses, I began to figure out that there were exit signs all over the place. And that if if I focused on the exit sign and just worked my way out of the haunted house and didn't pay attention to the stuff that was going on around me, then maybe I wouldn't be scared. And so we walked into the next haunted house, and I looked at the 3 people that I was with, and I was like, I love y'all, but I'll see y'all at the end. And I just began to focus on the exit sign. And I just began to work my way through all these haunted houses with all these things jumping out, and things coming out of the wall, and people jumping out trying to scare you. And yeah, there was a little bit of fear, but as long as I stayed focused on the exit sign and got my way through the haunted house and got to the end, when I got out, it wasn't quite as bad because I wasn't focused on the things that were going on around me. I was focused on the exit sign. I was just focused on my next step. Like, that's it. Like, I'm just going to keep my eyes there. I'm not going to look at anything to my left or to my right or behind me because they're not allowed to touch you. So I'm just going to go straight for the exit sign. One step at a time, one next step at a time, and work my way out of this room. And I survived the rest of the night by doing just that. Some of y'all may think that's ridiculous, but in this idea, like when I was focused on what I needed to be focused on, then I wasn't as fearful. When Peter was focused on his next step, when he was focused on keeping his eyes on Jesus and focusing on what he should be focusing on, he did fine. But the moment that he takes his eyes off of Jesus, then he begins to focus on everything else around him. That's when he began to sink. And so often in our lives, man, we start out fearless. Like, I'm going to conquer this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to start this new job, I'm going to start this new business, I'm going to take this new class, I'm going to change my major, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to whatever God's calling me to. I'm going to ask her to marry me, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, whatever it is. New things, new moves, new jobs, whatever. You fill in the blank. And we start out fearless. And then distractions come. And storms turn up. And people tell you that you can't. And people begin to tell you why you shouldn't. And you have all these critics and all these people that are telling you what's best for your life. And all these things begin to happen. And then we begin to believe certain things. And then we begin to doubt ourselves. And doubt sets in. And fear sets in. And the next thing you know, sometimes we just walk away from the dream that we were moving towards in the first place because now we've become fearful. That instead, if we would just focus on the next step, if we would just focus on what Jesus has for us, if we would just focus on Him and keep our eyes on Him, then maybe things would be different. The same way that I was focused on an exit sign to get out of a haunted house, if we could just be focused on what was before us and not what was around us, man, how different would things look in our lives. Because see, when our focus changes off of Jesus, then we allow fear to set in. When our focus changes off of Jesus, then we allow fear to set in. And so I ask you this morning, like, what are you in the middle of right now? That maybe you need to be fearless instead of fearful. What's the situation that you find yourself in right now? What is the decision that is before you that you need to be fearless instead of being fearful? Because like Peter, and the 4 things and the 4 reasons why I believe that Peter was fearless in this moment as he stepped out of the boat, which is significant because I'm not sure about you, but I know that I've never walked on water. I believe that there's 4 action steps for us, and they look just like Peter. That the first thing that we can do is that we can be obedient. If God is calling us to something, and Peter was obedient, when he said, Jesus, if it's you, tell me, and Jesus said, come, and Peter stepped out of the boat, he was obedient. You need to be obedient. our second action step in this is that we just need to believe. I mean, we have to believe that Jesus is who he says he is. For years, Kim and I told our youth groups, like, you can't build your faith off of our faith. You can't build your faith off of your parents' faith. You can't build your faith off of your grandparents' faith. Like, you have to believe that Jesus is who he says he is, and that has to be the rock and the foundation for you, because at some point, storms are going to come. You're going to walk maybe into a regular college campus, and someone's going to tell you that the Bible's fake and the Bible's not real, and it's going to rock everything that you know. And if your faith is built off of our faith as your youth pastor or your parents' faith, you're going to get rocked to the core. We see so many young adults walk away from faith. Like, we have to believe that Jesus is who he says he is. And understand that as God tells us in his word that I will never leave you nor forsake you and that I'm always with you. Like, do we believe that? The third thing that I believe that we can do is just for us to trust. I think so much of our relationship with God is built on trust. I think every day God wakes us up and he gives us something to do. Maybe we miss it because we're too busy. Maybe we miss it because it was the person at the gas station that we were supposed to talk to. Maybe it was the person in line at coffee that we were supposed to talk to. Maybe it was the friend that popped in our mind that we needed to text just to say good morning, I'm praying for you today, but you got busy and forgot to. Like, every day I believe God gives us something that we can do. And we are a follower of Jesus in the room this morning. I believe he gives us an assignment every day. And some days we get it right, and some days we miss it. But I believe so much of what he wants from us is built on trust. And we don't always trust. Sometimes we trust ourselves more than we trust him. And man, that's a recipe for disaster. Because I don't know about you, but I'm a mess. And the third thing that I believe, or the fourth thing that I think our action step, or the fourth thing that we need to do is we just need to know that we're loved. That you are loved by the King and the Creator of the universe. This entire year we've been using the terminology that you are a son and a daughter of the King. Like, we have unpacked that in a 4-week sermon series. We've just begun to talk about this. It's been language. It's been part of our culture. It's been part of what we've been talking about all year long. Because, man, there's just this realization. Like, I've been following Jesus now for 15 years. But, man, this year, like, just this realization that I am really, truly a son of the Father. Like, that he loves me, and that he cares for me, and that he delights in me, and that he's proud of me. Not based on how many people are in my church, or based on how many people I do, when this happens, or the things that I do. Like, he just loves me because my name is Kevin Busse. And you are a son and a daughter of a king. And I think sometimes we just need to take a step back and realize and understand that we're just loved. Because the love of the Father can propel us forward. The love of the Father can help us be fearless instead of being fearful. So I ask you to focus on whatever the next step is. Well, whatever it is, just focus on what the next step is. You know, often when we're writing a sermon, so often I think about certain people in the church, or I think about certain situations that I know are going on in people's lives, and thinking about stuff, and then there's ever so often that God's like, hey, this note is for them, but it's also for you. And this week he was like, hey man, just focus on the next step. Like, you're so focused on what the church looks like 5 and 10 years from now, like, just focus on what the next step looks like. Because you can't take 10 steps before you take 1 step. So just focus on what the next step is. And for us, as we begin to step into a life that is fearless instead of fearful, let's just focus on the next step. So as you step into obedience, as you begin to believe, as you begin to trust, I want you to know that fear will sink in, or fear will sink you, that Jesus can save you. No matter what it is that we're stepping into, it's going to be a scary situation. So often, there's situations that we step out in full faith, and full excitement, and full things, and like, woo, we're going to do this. And then fear begins to sink in, and fear begins to sink us. But man, in the same way that Jesus reached down with his hand and pulled Peter out of the water, fear will sink you. But Jesus can save you. And so I ask you a question this morning, like what would it look like in our lives? What would it look like in the life of our church? What would it look like in the life of our church and the impact that we could make on this community if we were to live fearlessly instead of fearful? Like maybe whatever the situation is that you may be facing right now, and whether there's 50 people in a room or 500 people in a room or 5,000 people in a room, there's people that are going through something right now in this moment that you're fearful for. It may be something small, it may be something big, and I don't know. You know, and God knows. But man, what if we were to step in and we were just to step into a life that was fearless instead of a life that was fearful? Because living fearlessly takes trust and it takes obedience. Are you ready for that? Are you ready to trust? Are you ready to be obedient? Because I don't know about you. In the same way as a high school student working my way through haunted houses at Universal Studio, I didn't want to be fearful. And so I had to figure out a way that I could work my way through this thing so that I could be done because it wasn't my thing. And so no matter what the storm is, no matter what we're facing, no matter what we're going through right now, I want you to know without question, He loves you, He's with you, He will walk with you, He will be with you. I will never leave you or forsake you. That is a promise of His Scripture. Fear will sink you. Jesus can save you. And it doesn't always mean that everything's going to be great and everything's going to be hunky-dory and everything's going to be awesome and you're always just going to have rainbows and unicorns, right? Like it's always going to be great. Life is tough. And there's storms that come and things that come and fear that sets in. But man, I know that I can just be obedient, if I can just believe, if I can just trust, if I can just love the way that He loves me, and look out. So I want to ask you to close your eyes and bow your head.